Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Bitches Love Sports. I'm your host, Jazz Monet. And tonight I am joined by special guest, Bryan Broaddus of DallasCowboys.com, of 105.3 The Fan, of the Doing All Right / Lombrodica's podcast. I don't know what you want to call that. You can go ahead and tell the people about it, though.
Yeah, Jazz, it's great to be with you. Thank you so much for having me this evening. Vach and I have we call it the we're doing all right, and that's kind of a joke that when we used to take calls or when I take calls, the pleasantries part of the call when it's always like, "Hey Brian, Joe here in Flower Mound. Hey, how you doing? Great, you know that." And you always do that. There's always that. Yeah, I'm doing great, thanks. So Vach kind of made a joke about it. He's like, hey, we're doing all right. And so everybody knows now then that's the name of our podcast. But really enjoy working with Vach a lot. I've enjoyed working with a lot of the YouTubers. I have a lot of respect for the work and the hustle that you have as well. So it's an honor to be with you tonight from the tennis courts in the media area here in Oxnard, California.
Where I was also supposed to be.
Yeah, we
But
miss you.
as everyone who follows me knows, I came down with the flu. So I'm still recovering from that a little bit. Actually, I should say I'm recovered. My voice is still bouncing back. Anybody who watched me last time got to hear my NPR voice. I'm a little bit past my NPR voice and I'm getting back to my normal voice. So we're getting there. We're getting there. But I had a lot of sympathy for when I heard about what Tyler Guyton was going through.
Ah,
And there were people who were like, oh, that's just an excuse. And I was like, no, no, no. It can really put you down for like a week. And oh man, like as you know, I live on the third floor of my apartment.
hmm.
And the first day that I was really sick, I was like, no, it's all in my head. I'll be fine. I can still go run my errands. And I put my mask on and I went downstairs and I went back upstairs and I was breathing so hard. I was like, what is going on? And it's not COVID, guys. It's
Yeah.
not COVID, guys. Just the flu. But anyway, moving on from there. We definitely got to get through the shout outs and call outs real quick because we already have questions in the chat. I just got my first ever super chat, which
Hey,
I
there
don't
you go.
I don't have a special sound for because I never get them. But thank you, Formula 44448888 from my very first super chat. I'll go ahead and ask that because I don't know if they disappear or what. So we'll ask this question, we'll do shout outs and call outs, and then we'll get into the Cowboys stuff that we're going to talk about. But they said BV, which stands for Bryan Broaddus.
Yeah.
When do you think 88 and 4 gets done? Those contracts is what it looks like they're asking about.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, and keep those things coming. Those are very, very nice for people that broadcast. But I think we had a little bit of some buzzing around with CD the last couple of days, and I'm sure you and I are going to get into the comments that Jerry Jones made.
Oh,
And
yes.
so I'll leave that for when you want to get to that. Well, what I do know is when you're here in Oxnard and around the people who are involved, you hear whispers. You kind of say, okay, well, this is a good, this is a bad. Oh, this looks like it's not going to work. A lot of people are whispering about this particular contract with CD Lamb. Those conversations seem to be leaning towards the number appears to be agreed on.
Mm.
How it's structured is now the sticking point with the parties. And again, this is coming from folks that I bump into, and they're nice enough to share a little information to try and give me a little clarity. So when I'm doing your podcast or working with Vach or working on 105.3 The Fan, that maybe I have a little bit better understanding of what direction. But it sounds like to me that they have an idea on those numbers, just how they structured. This is what's really been unfortunate for the Cowboys, that most teams get their contracts staggered, and especially their star players, and they don't all come at once. Now, people will say, well hey, Broaddus, they brought this on themselves. They could have had this done. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right about that. But this is the way this front office operates, and there's a side of me that believes that I thought the Lamb thing was going to probably be done several days ago, and now with Jerry, and whether again, I'll get in that later when you ask me that question, but hopefully the things that I'm hearing are going the right way with CD. I know the conversation with Jerry didn't sound very positive, but it sounded like to me, talking to people, they were going in the right way with some stuff. The Dak situation, I think, is completely different. And it's completely different because there's a side of me that believes that they're going to let him play this contract out. I haven't heard as much about Dak's deal. And I think that we're hearing more about CD's deal because CD isn't here and they want to get him in camp. But it has allowed some others with him not being here to shine. I think they've got a better understanding of Jalen Tolbert. He's been outstanding in this camp. So they've had some receivers that have stepped up. Do they want CeeDee Lamb here? Absolutely. But I do feel like, though, that if they can get the structure correct or to the liking of both parties, then you're going to see this contract get done.
With CD, I kind of figured that the structure might be one of the holdups. Just when you listen to Jerry Jones and the way that he talks about the salary cap, yes, they do sometimes talk about the pie, which gets on people's nerves.
Right. Absolutely.
But Jerry himself also talks a lot about just dead money and how past deals are affecting their ability to negotiate current deals. And you start to get the idea that, okay, they're trying to figure out how to set this up in a way that they don't keep, I guess, kicking themselves the same way that they've done, right, or the same way it sounds like they've done in the past. So I really do hope they can work that out.
See, and Jazz, there's a lot of information out there that, you know, and there was an article in The Athletic that was recently written about Dak. Well, it broke down all three of the contracts that were pending when you look at Dak, CD, and then potentially Micah Parsons. So the Dak one, there was and I asked somebody in the know, I go, wait a minute, if you let this contract run out, $26 million of dead money goes away? And this guy said, no, that's not factual. This is the problem that we run into, Jazz. This is the problem, that we're trying to be first. We're not trying to be right. We're trying to get information out there, but there's a lot of false information about how these deals are structured, how the collective bargaining agreements work. You know, there's a lot of things that guys and gals put out there that fans digest. I mean, there's fans that right now are watching us on a Saturday night because they want to learn about their football team. You know, they want to learn about things. And, you know, I feel like, hey, try and bring that to, you know, as much reality and as much knowledge to the game as I can. I don't know everything about the cap, but I ask questions to the people that do. And, you know, when you're all of a sudden, I'm like, $26 million goes away that doesn't sound right. So what do you do? You ask a question. I mean, they're looking at $40 million of dead money is what they're looking at. Money doesn't go away. That's going to be part of what they do. So, you know, people read that. They trust the author of it. They, you know, they're all saying like, wow, I heard 26 million if they let it. No, that's not true. So now you got people that are confused. And I think with these contracts, it's such a big business as far as these players. And I applaud the players for trying to get what they can. You know, when you look at Dak, he's one of the top quarterbacks in the league. Look at CD, he's one of the top wide receivers in the league. You know, the Cowboys are very fortunate that they have both of these guys, you know, but I think that they're going to have to make a decision, and they're clearly going to make a decision. I think they're going to get the CD one done. I don't know about the Dak Prescott, but I haven't heard anything different. You know, I've heard things that, well, okay, where's the progress? Well, there's not really any progress right now. You know, do we want to get it done? Sure. How bad do you want to get it done? We'll see. But there is legitimately, you know, Jerry's talked about not a sense of urgency, but people in the know that I'm talking to, and here's Jerry Jones, the owner, he says what he says. He is getting to see his wide receivers practice without CeeDee Lamb out there. But he's also, he's also got his cap guys working on getting this deal done. So that's where we're at right now.
Well, that is all great info. Thank you so much for sharing. And we're going to put a pin in that. We are going to come back to that, guys. I'm just gonna do these shout outs and call outs real quick. I've got 2 shout outs for the Olympics. I'm answering a question someone asked me about the Olympics, and then we'll get back into this Cowboys information. So, quick shout out to Team USA men's basketball. They played against France today in the gold medal round. They ended up winning 98-87, but it was kind of close there for a while, especially in the beginning. I think France actually had the lead for a few minutes in the first half. But Team USA came back, ended up winning. They turned it up in the fourth quarter, a lot like they did against Serbia. And now they're gold medalists again for the, what is it, fifth time?
Fifth time. Yeah. Fifth time. Yeah.
So shout out to them. Also shout out to Team USA women's basketball. They had their semifinal game yesterday against Australia. It was not nearly as exciting as the men's semifinal game, but the women will also play against France for their gold medal. They'll play tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Central Time. So if you want to catch that, turn on your televisions in the morning and catch that one. So the question I was asked about the Olympics was about the 3x3 basketball team.
Yeah.
And people were wondering why, I don't have a nice way to say it, why our 3x3 men's basketball, not the women, they did okay. I think they got bronze. I don't remember exactly. But the 3x3 men's team looks pretty much atrocious. And they're like, why can't we take the players who didn't make the NBA Olympic team and put them on the 3x3 team so that we have a better showing? So the answer is this. In order to play in the Olympics on the 3x3 team, you have to comply with FIBA's eligibility rules. So it requires each country's roster to have 2 players ranked within the top 10 of that country and 2 players ranked within the top 50. Or if you don't have 50 players, there's like a number of ranking points. Additionally, they expect Olympic rosters to be made up of athletes who play regularly on the FIBA 3x3 World Tour. So basically, there are no NBA players who are going to take their offseason or whatever spare time they have to play 3x3 basketball, because even the guys who just like ride the bench, they have too much on the line and they make too much money to like actually care, honestly. Yeah. So unless that changes, we're going to get who we get in 3x3. And now somebody asked about college guys. There was a guy on this year's team who had a good college career, but never played in the NBA. Right. I think now with the NIL rules, that would make things complicated as far as players also trying to do 3x3, because the same stipulations would be required of them. They would also have to play in the FIBA World Tour. So even though they do have a little bit more time available than guys in the NBA, them also trying to make the 3x3 rankings for the US would still be a lot on their plate. They probably demand, like the good ones would probably demand a lot in compensation because they're getting a lot from their NIL deals. Right. And so even though college is not the NBA, you'd run into a lot of the same issues, just in a different package. So for now, we're going to get guys who you never heard of in college and who never played NBA, who are like, I still love basketball and I'm going to go play 3x3. And they climb up the rankings and then they represent us in the Olympics. And then they look like trash against countries like Latvia.
Yeah. So that's Jimmer Fredette and guys like that, are made up. So this to me seems like something that the Olympic Committee, the U.S. Olympic Committee, will figure out. This is like, okay, here's an opportunity for us to be better at something. Yeah, I don't think the United States wants to be embarrassed in any way, especially in the summer games. The winter games is a different story. We struggle traditionally with winter sports. We don't. Right. We've had some great downhill skiers, some alpine skiers. We've had, fortunately the luge, the bobsled. I mean, that's kind of got around. Hockey, of course, is one of those things in the past. But this is an opportunity, I think, for the U.S. Olympic Committee to look at, okay, what sports are we not very strong at? And then how do we find ways to enhance or add or make sure that the next time that the games are being held here in Los Angeles, that our 3-on-3 basketball team has a really good showing. And so,
especially in the country.
I think that the committee evaluates their sports. I think they evaluate where they're at. They've got to figure out. Now, let's talk about this real quick. Something's going on with this relay team, this men's relay team. Something is pressure. You look at it. The last several Olympics, it has not been as good. Now, other track events have been outstanding. The Jamaicans haven't been as strong this year. That's something that you kind of, you look at, and usually that's the one squad that you have to deal with. But, other countries are getting better in their sprinting and their relays and things like that. They've always been good in distances. But the U.S., they have to look at their men's relay team and say, okay, where's the disconnect here? What's the issues? I mean, you've got star athletes, big time athletes, and to not have the success in the relays like they should, it has to be disconcerting. But I think the Olympic Committee will look at all their sports and figure out, like, where do we need to maybe appropriate funds or try and get maybe a better combination of athletes to compete with the other world athletes.
Oh yeah, I saw Carl Lewis's comments about the
Yeah.
relay team, and I don't pay enough attention to the world of track and field to know if what he was saying about politics was true.
Yeah.
But whatever is happening for Carl Lewis to speak out negatively for the entire world to see, I feel like something serious must be going on there.
Yeah,
Because
it
that's
is.
not something that he normally does. Like, this isn't the first time that they performed poorly.
Right.
So I feel like whatever is going on, it pushed him over the edge. So they definitely need to resolve that. Finally, the last of my shout outs and call outs, and this is a call out. I'll see if I can share the video while you're on the screen. But this is a call out for a new event that popped up in the Olympics this year. So breakdancing became a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And now this is a video that went viral. So this isn't like really representative of all that we saw from breakdancing. I saw some of the men's round robin this morning, and they actually looked decent. There's a lot of rules and regulations that go into Olympic breakdancing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is a video that went viral because this person is just not very good,
Right.
based on what we know breakdancing to be.
Right.
And so it's one of those things where, okay, so for anyone who doesn't know, for anyone who's not aware, breakdancing originated in the Bronx in the early 80s, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's often associated with that time period and with other aspects of hip hop culture, like graffiti art and DJs and things of that nature. And so I'll say one of the things that some people are upset about, and I would say they have a reason to be, is that it's not just the dancing, it's that they also try to bring in the culture of breakdancing without really referencing any experts on the culture. So if you actually watch the competition, they do have an MC, they do have a DJ. The competitors, oh Lord, I hadn't watched this whole video. The competitors actually do seem like they're trying to dress in the same style as the time period.
Yeah.
And I think this is the issue that a lot of people have when it comes to appropriation, is that appropriation, I'm just going to go back to the beginning because now they're just making fun of her. But appropriation sometimes leads to erasure. And so that's the major call up that I wanted to make when it came to this particular sport. It's like breakdancing itself is actually kind of a dying art form from what I've heard in New York and in the Bronx. And there's a lot of people who are capitalizing on it right now. And this isn't the first year. Like, there's been several years where Red Bull and other organizations have had world championships, national championships for breakdancing. And none of that seems to be going to the communities where it's originated. And I'm like, if you're going to take the art form, commoditize it, and allow it to be turned into this, the least you could do is try to give back to the communities where it came from. That's it. So hopefully they kind of re-examine how this whole thing plays out. If they bring it back in 2028, I heard a rumor that it's not coming back. Yeah. So we'll see. But if they do, I hope they really reconsider how they select the performers, and where the proceeds go for the people who benefit financially from this.
Yeah, that and hey, good for her. World stage, get the opportunity. There's your 15 minutes of fame. It's so funny that you mentioned breakdancing, and I was at dinner with Jeff Kavanaugh and John Machota one night, and we were at a restaurant, and they had ESPN 8, and they had breakdancing. It was live. I mean, they had the big sponsorship. You mentioned Red Bull, all this stuff like that. And it was serious. I mean, there was some serious competition. and you're like, man, what athletic ability, what flexibility, what ability, the way to choreograph and the music and everything that's involved was, and we were just sitting there amazed. And I got to admit, I couldn't know judging. I didn't know if it looked impressive, and we were trying to figure out who was going to win this. Like, we were eating dinner and watching it in a way of like, okay, that guy right there, oh wait, this next guy, whoa, watch that, wait, and then they'd have the dance off of it, and then so you got to see them side by side doing it, and it was like pretty impressive. It was not pretty impressive; it was really impressive to see the athletic ability, the talent, and then to see this in the Olympics. You're kind of like going, okay, maybe we missed the mark here. Maybe we missed the mark. So, and if they don't have it, in Los Angeles, which to me it seems like United States, it would be perfect to have that. They would have a venue, I'm sure, that would be well suited. Like the skateboard stuff in Paris was really well done, and you're kind of thinking like, okay, if you could have that kind of arena, then maybe you can even draw out the competition even better. But it'd be unfortunate if, in fact, we don't have it anymore.
Well, we'll see what happens there. Speaking of 2028, have you seen the commercial for the flag football competition that's going to happen in 2028?
Yeah, that's very exciting. I know the NFL. I can't tell you how many emails I get on a weekly basis talking about USA flag football, and and some of the commercials, the female teams. There's a little wide receiver that would make Puka Nacua jealous. How well she catches the ball and how well she moves around, and some of the great, you talk about talented, athletic, these females that play, the kids that play. There seems to be a real movement for the flag football stuff, which is, it's interesting because the NFL makes its living on playing a contact sport,
Yes.
and I know myself, I've made a life out of contact football. I have had a career because of football. And people say, I let my son play through high school football. He was a quarterback. Was I nervous every single play? Yes, I was. Absolutely. But we got through it. And I could always, anytime you're playing football, flag, but the contact football, I could see where a lot of parents now are saying, no, I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want to subject my child to this. And I understand that. And I would be very hypocritical of me to sit there and say, well, you should make your kid play. That's not what my idea is. Like I say, I've made a living because parents have allowed their sons to play high school football, college football, and some of them play for me in the NFL. And so anytime I can get, I'm all about the game. I am all about football, but I can understand why we're having more of a push to flag football just for safety reasons.
Yeah, not only that, but I I feel like at the end of the day, everything the NFL does comes down to their bottom line.
It's true.
And flag football as a sport is just so much easier to spread internationally,
It is.
especially when you look at the requirements to get into the Olympics require a sport to be played in a certain number of countries. And also, I think what they're trying to do with gender equity right now, the fact that they have room for both boys and girls or men and women to play, actually help them get it into the Olympics.
Yeah.
So I personally like the fact that it gives girls and women access to yet another sport that a lot of them are proving to be very good at.
Yeah.
But it's just a much easier sell to other countries than contact football is.
Well, I did see a clip the other day where full contact football, Japan beat the United States in a game. They actually,
Really?
in an 11-on-11 football. Yeah.
What football team was it? Because I've watched Japan's
was
X League, their pro football league.
They got a win. I think if you Googled it right now, you could see that the Japan fielded a team that beat a fielded United States team and beat them pretty handedly. So I was
Hmm.
kind of like, it got my attention. I meant to go because of my radio job on 105.3 The Fan. We brought it up, and I was kind of like, do we really want to talk about this, that we're not any good at football anymore? And but no, we kind of brought it, like I said, we brought it up. But I'll say this though, Jazz, one of my first professional jobs was in 1990. I worked with NFL Europe, where American football was taken overseas, and we had teams in Barcelona and Frankfurt and London. And at the time, really, the fans were learning about the game. They kind of had an idea. You go over there today and talk to people, some of the most knowledgeable football fans are overseas. And I'm not just saying that because some of them are probably listening to you and I talk right now. I was amazed when I went over there in 1990 how different. And then you go back in 2014 when the Cowboys were playing Jacksonville, and the fan base there, the knowledge of the game, the questions that are asked, the way they absorb, whether it's through podcast, DallasCowboys.com, NFL.com, whatever, YouTube, however they're taking in their football, they're super, super knowledgeable about what's going on. I get so many good questions from fans overseas, and I've a friend in Saudi Arabia, one of the biggest Cowboy fans you'll ever imagine. I get questions from him every single day about this football team. Really good questions. And I had the opportunity to go to Saudi, and those people over there, they care about football. They know about football. And I think it's becoming that type of a worldwide, and I think the NFL sees that. They're playing games in Europe. We're playing a game, Green Bay and Philly are going to play down in Brazil. So it's a growing game for sure. And the fan base is, I think we're all benefiting from the fan bases growing with that game.
I'll have to look into this story about Japan beating the U.S.
Did you
But
see
I'll
it?
be really excited when the NFL goes to Japan. Like, I'll be really excited about that. But for now, let's bring this whole idea of being knowledgeable about I can't talk today. Let's bring the whole idea of being knowledgeable about the game back to our Cowboys that we love
Sure.
so much. So there was a trade recently.
Yeah.
Nahshon Wright for Andrew Booth.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of talk about that, a surprising amount of talk considering how little information that we actually have. So at this point, anyone who's keeping up with the team enough to actually be aware of the trade, they know things like the fact that I think a lot of people were thinking that this was something pushed by Mike Zimmer. Andrew Booth wasn't with the Vikings at the same time as Zimmer. So they didn't really cross paths there. Mm-hmm. Now, could Zim have gotten some information that made him particularly excited about this player? Possibly. But my thing was this. There was so much talk on Twitter about what this guy may or may not bring to the team, but he only played 11% of the snaps last season with the Vikings. Mm-hmm. And the season before that, his first season in the league, it was even less because he was dealing with an injury. Right. So what is it that people think they're seeing when they watch this guy, considering that there's so little information out there about what he brings on the field?
Yeah, Jess, I think when you look at this, and this happens quite a bit in the National Football League, believe it or not. I say it happens a lot, but it's one of those things where you have a player, and to be honest with you, Nahshon Wright was playing. He was a starter at right corner in place of Diggs. He has been getting the lion's share of the work, and so, but he's also been struggling. In the Rams practices the other day, they caught him on a corner route. There's been times where he's given up deep balls. He's given up in-cut routes. He's given up slants. He's made some plays. Nahshon Wright, much like Israel Mukuamu, we're on their last legs. We're probably, you've got guys like Carson and others, DeBerry. I mean, some young guys have kind of stepped up here at camp. And when you got a veteran guy, and yeah, they're not making a whole heck of a lot of money, but you're thinking like, man, I'm going to give him one more shot. We get a week into the camp, we get 10 days into camp, we have some practices. Nahshon Wright's looking like he's not going to make your football team. That's the way it is. Okay, the Minnesota Vikings are looking at Booth the same way. They drafted Booth in the second round. He came out of the draft in 2022, played a lot of zone coverage there at Clemson, played a lot of zone coverage. He's kind of a special teams guy with the Vikings. But when you watched him play, I saw him play on the outside quite a bit. People are saying, well, maybe he could play inside at slot. I didn't see that with my own eyes. I know he's a big guy. He's got some size to him. But I saw him playing on the outside. He's like a 50-50 tackler. He was a 50-50 tackler at Clemson. I saw him, in the preseason last year against Seattle, get beat on a double move. They tried to drive him on they went on the slant and then out, and then he bit on the play. He overshot the play, and the receiver got behind him. But when you watched him play in college at Clemson, didn't have a whole lot of time. I mean, like I say, they played in a lot of zone coverage. He didn't have a lot of opportunities. They didn't throw the ball his direction. But he was a second-round pick. So all of a sudden, Minnesota's like, well, we just don't like what we see here. We'll give up. We'll trade our guy that we don't like for your guy that you don't like. And the money works out very, very evenly. So it's like Dallas picks up like $400,000 more salary cap, but that's manageable. They'll figure out a way to get that taken care of if he makes the team. So this is kind of where you're at right now. I mean, I felt like, to me, with Carson and the rookie, the way he's played, he's shown that he deserved, even if Nahshon Wright still was here, I would have taken Carson and given him all the Nahshon Wright's reps. I would have said, okay, Nahshon, you're now the 2. Carson, you're the 1. Let's go. They've got to figure out where they're at with Carson, because we don't know the situation with Diggs. Diggs is working his way back in, but what have we seen as people that fans, or as we've covered this team, that these knee injuries that these guys have coming back from, it's like 5 or 6 weeks before they honestly start looking good. When they start, it's like week 5, all of a sudden Pollard looks like a real running back again. See what happened to Terrence Steele. He didn't look like the same guy after the knee injury. I think the Cowboys need to protect themselves. And they're going to protect themselves by potentially adding Boots, seeing what he can give them. Maybe a change of scenery will be good for him. And then also using Carson and try and get 4 corners that can play. And if something happens where Diggs is not ready to really play, they've kind of protected themselves that way.
Yeah, and I honestly was thinking that Diggs wouldn't be ready when the season began, because I think sometimes people kind of lose sight of the timeline, but it hasn't been a complete year yet since when Diggs got injured. He got injured several weeks into the regular season.
Right.
And so it serves to reason that while we're all excited that he's been doing things at camp, it serves to reason that he wouldn't be quite ready to come back into like being 100% on the field yet.
Right.
So it definitely makes sense that they're going to try to make some choices to make sure that they're covered at that position, because I don't think we should expect him to be back. Now, when it comes to Booth, what you described is exactly what I was seeing. I was like, I don't know if they are sure that they're going to get what they want in Booth, but I think they're pretty much done with Wright, because there were 2 things about Nahshon Wright, and I did like him, right? Yeah. However, 2 things were true. 1, this is the last year of his contract.
Right.
So they were going to have to figure out something to do with him. And 2, he does seem to kind of have the same issues every year. Yeah. So I think even though we see good things from him sometimes, the issues that he has, the mistakes that he makes are things that they were kind of saying year after year. And it's like, okay, you're not really getting past these things the way we like you to. So with that being the case, and this being your last year, we're just going to try to get something for you and hope for the best. Yeah. That was what I read in this situation.
No, I know you absolutely read it right. As a former pro personnel guy, when you start, this is the time of year. It's like, listen, we're not going to hold on to a guy to hope that he'll turn the corner. He hasn't turned the corner in 4 years. He is what he is, and let's move on. And I give Will McClay and those guys in the pro department a lot of credit. It's like, listen, we're not, this guy's likely not going to be able to help us. We've got a rookie that looks like he can help us. Wait a minute. Hey, there's a team out there that, maybe the Vikings called them and said, listen, we've got this kid Booth. What would you be interested in doing something with him? And they would probably say, well, listen, we've got Nashawn Wright. Take a peek at him. Tell me what you think. And the money seems to work for both sides. And if you want to make the trade, give us a call back. Boom. They make the trade. They make the callbacks. And now you've got a player that he's, your player that you tried to use. He's now someone else's property, and you try with something different. It's doing your job in pro personnel is really what it is.
Exactly. So hopefully that enlightens some of the people who are trying to figure out
Yeah.
what exactly to expect from this. I think this time of year in general, people are just like kind of digging for any information,
Mm-hmm.
anything that can help them kind of predict the future. Like even when it comes to some of the things that we see at training camp or in the preseason, there's so many things that I feel like people read way too deep into. And I'm like, yo, can we just like wait till the regular season comes around?
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of that, we've got a preseason game happening tomorrow. It's
Yeah.
going to be something else that people are going to read a lot into.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when the Cowboys had the joint practice with the Rams, one of the things that Mike McCarthy said that morning was that he wasn't really looking at that as an opportunity to do a bunch of things in terms of scheme. He just wanted his guys to get some good reps.
He was a man
Is
of his
that the
word.
same kind of thing that we should expect in the preseason game?
Yeah, I think so, Jazz. When I was watching them work through yesterday's practice was a cards practice. And when I say cards, even though they scrimmaged the Rams 2 days ago, they kind of drew up some cards and they gave them some formations and they ran some plays. And they took advantage of, the young guys, they even had a period. They called it out. Bones Fossil, who is kind of the MC of practice, yelled, 2-minute practice, young guy practice. So the next thing you know, it was all the veterans took a hike. All the veterans walked to the locker room. And then you had all the young guys. You had the Cooper Beebes and guys like that were, that stayed on the field. They worked their 2-minute drill. Mike didn't show a whole lot in the scheming of the practice. There were a couple of really nice shots that Dak took down the middle of the field we've kind of talked about. People might have saw him on clips. Brandon Cooks made a couple of really nice plays. They ran what we call the boot or the waggle series, where they did move the pocket. You send the defense one way, quarterback goes the other. You throw the ball to Jake Ferguson. It's about a 12-yard gain. That's kind of how they played football the other day. So they didn't show the Rams a whole heck of a lot. They were pretty consistent in their run game. The left side of the offensive line found some really good traction. I don't know. I don't see the Rams practice every day, so I don't know if they're having run game problems or run defense problems. But when you looked at Hoffman, when you looked at Smith, who's having outstanding camp, Tyler Smith is one of the top 3 or 4 guys when it comes to observations for me that's having that type of camp. And then even Chuma Edoga. And when I say Chuma Edoga, every time Vach Lombardi, he gives me that Chuma Edoga, right, Brian? Chuma Edoga? And I'm like, yeah, so, but give him credit. They ran the ball, and then Chuma got the back spasms, and they had to make the switch. They didn't have Guyton available. By the way, Guyton, Jazz, just to let you know, they're gonna take him to the game tomorrow, from what I heard, and they're gonna see how things go. And if he does play, he will be what they call in a pitch count. There's going to be a certain amount of plays that they're going to let him play. So if you see number 60 at left tackle, now when they were doing the young guy practice, he was part of the young guy practice. So that I was like, okay, 60 might be trying to give it a go. After practice, I asked some people in the know, hey, what about 60 for the game? They said, hey, we'll see. If he goes, he's going to be limited to how much he really, really plays. So, Matt Willetsko, Adoga, all those guys are going to get opportunities to probably play in this game. So it's probably going to be, it's maybe early Cooper Rush, and then you're going to see Trey Lance probably quite a bit in this football game tomorrow.
Now, when it comes to Tyler Guyton's quote-unquote pitch count, is that because of his illness, or is it for some other reason?
Illness, yeah. And like you talked about walking up and down stairs, He is, and I don't know the medical term. I didn't ask. I just know that he's got chest issues. So when you have chest issues, breathing is, now he was missed practice where you didn't see him at all. He was in his room, the whole time. Now I don't know, like I said, they just told me, hey, it's a chest cold. I said, okay, I'll take your word for that, the chest cold. But he was out for quite a bit, and now he's, like we say, working his way back in. But they're worried a little bit about his conditioning. He's tried to do some things. He's been doing some stuff in the team period. Excuse me, when they pre-practice stuff, like the individual period. He's been doing that stuff, but not so much, kind of with the team or the 9-on-7 or the other things that they do. So they're going to try and work him back in and get him going. And hopefully this next week we see more of Tyler Guyton playing left tackle because he's off to a pretty good start with what we've seen so far.
Yeah, and I'm going to give people a little bit of a medical background. I don't have information on Tyler Guyton's situation specifically, and I also don't have the technical term that you were looking for.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to talk about generally how sometimes things like the flu and chest colds can affect people long term. A lot of people think about the lungs as like these two big balloons that are like in your abdomen. They're really not. They're two big organs, and where your air goes into is actually like a bunch of tiny little pockets the size of grapes that are connected by valves, right? So what sometimes happens when a person gets certain types of illness is that as you're breathing and whatever's going on in your nasal passage and in your throat, that can end up going into your lungs. And so, like I said, they're not these big balloons. They're like these little tiny things. So now you've got like these little tiny things all in your lungs that have like basically buildup. You can think of it as buildup in them. And so your lungs are responsible for transporting oxygen to and from different parts of your body. So basically, even when you start to feel better, your lungs might not be 100% in terms of transporting oxygen where they need to go. Sometimes there's still inflammation or buildup like in your throat and in your nasal passage. So like speaking for myself, I'm not contagious anymore, but you can hear it in my voice that like I don't sound like I normally sound, and I can feel it when I work out. So just putting that out there for people who are like, oh, he's making excuses. I'm like, no, this is a thing that can have some lasting effects. So give him some time.
If you can't breathe, you can't play.
Right.
pretty simple.
So let's go from there into some of the questions that people have been posting.
Okay.
I want to do a few of those,
sure,
and then we can kind of talk about what we were talking about at the beginning with the contracts.
Sure.
So one person said, I'm going to ask their question because they were the first one in the chat.
Good.
They said, I hope they give Trey one more year to develop and bring him along slowly. I feel QBs are thrown to the wolves. Do you think Trey will get another year?
It's a great question. Thank you very much for posting it. I think with Trey, very early in practice, Trey did not look very good. Trey did not look very decisive. Trey did not look committed. Trey was checking the ball down. There appeared to be some nerves about the way he was throwing the football. First few days of camp just weren't good enough, and especially when the ball was going to the outside, it tended to sail on him. He wasn't as accurate as he needed to be. These last few practices, when we did the blue-white scrimmage last week, a week ago, he threw the ball much better. The touch, the accuracy, a lot better with Trey Lance. He's not under contract after this season, but all the Cowboy quarterbacks are not under contract. So here you go.
Including Rush.
Yeah, including Rush. So here you go. If they make a determination that all of a sudden in these 3 preseason games that Trey Lance is playing for the second quarterback spot right now for the Dallas Cowboys. That's what he's trying to compete for. I think Cooper Rush is your safety net. They know what Cooper Rush is. They know they can win games if they have to with Cooper Rush. Cooper Rush actually is having a pretty good camp throwing the ball around. He went from being a kind of a check down guy to, hey, let me take a shot here on this deep out. Let me throw this inside breaking route. Let me try and throw a ball down the sideline, see if I can fit it in there. He's kind of playing with like house money where he's like, hey, I'm either going to be the 2 or the 3. That's how he looks at this. So he's having a pretty good camp. With Trey, they had Trey for a whole year. None of us in the media in Dallas saw Trey Lance practice at all. I went to a lot of practices, did a lot of work there at the Star. Never saw Trey Lance practice except like in pre-drills. Never saw him take snaps. Never saw him play team. Never saw any of that. They have an idea what Trey is, but he's throwing the ball better. These preseason games are going to be huge. He's going to get opportunities to lead the team. Will he have, and the one good thing I really like, Jazz, is that these receivers that he'll be throwing to have all been super competitive in camp. They've been a good group. Or, are they the 5th, 6th, 7th type guys? Yeah, that's how they are. But they've all been competitive. When you look at each day, somebody comes up with a play. Durden comes up with a play. McMath comes up with a play. We've talked about Cropper a ton. Lance is going to be throwing the ball to guys that can potentially help him look good and make plays. They've done a good job of getting open and against a difficult defense. It's disguising a lot of looks for them. The tight ends, Schoonmaker hasn't, he missed some practice with the groin injury. He's, but he can catch the football. They've got guys, Stevens, these guys that if these receivers and these tight ends, if the line gives him time, he can complete some passes and he can look pretty good. So to the point of the question, yeah, I think there's some positive things. Initially, I was like, man, this guy looks not good. And now I think the last, say, 7 to 8 practices has been a much better example of what Trey Lance could be.
Yeah. The contract situation was what I was going to comment on in response to their question of, do I think he'll get another year?
Yeah.
It's like, it depends on if they really feel like keeping him, because it's not like he's automatically going to be here.
Right.
And it's like, we're still trying to figure out the situation with our QB1.
Right.
And I mean, let's be real. They're probably going to have to work out something with QB2 as well, because I have to believe that there are other teams who are like, yeah, we like what we're seeing from Rush. We could use a backup like him. Or I honestly believe there are some teams who might even be like, you know what? He could be number one. If you look at the quarterback situations for some of these teams, it's getting crazy out there. So the Cowboys have a lot to work out when it comes to the quarterback room.
Yeah, this is, and I'll leave you with this one. If Dak does not sign, then it's a $40 million cap hit. If so, that's that. Okay, if the offer is $60 million or the ask is $60 million, do you give Trey Lance $20 million? So what you basically, do you basically say, okay, we'll take the dead hit with Dak. We're going to try and sign Trey Lance to a $20 million deal, and there's your $60 million. Or do you just go ahead and say, we'll give Dak the $60 million? That's probably what they're debating right now. One way or another, they're probably going to have to pay $60 million. Maybe they get Trey Lance for less. Maybe all of a sudden they decide they move on from Dak, and then, Trey Lance is going to be the quarterback. Where does that number fall? Is that an $18 to $20 million a year quarterback, or is it less? That's the determination that they're going to have to make.
Yeah, and that's just the quarterback room. There's actually a good number of guys who either this year or next year is their last year.
Yeah.
So
maybe the head coach too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When it comes to the numbers, there's a lot going on there besides just what's been in the headlines.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so a few more. Brandy Mahoney just said, Broaddus, we appreciate you. I saw you on Botch with What's the King and now this.
Yeah.
So thank you for watching,
Brandy. Thank you, Brandy. I appreciate you checking me out on those platforms. Very kind of you.
We got another super chat from Formula 4444888.
Hey, there you go. Thank you very much.
So Jazz, really enjoy the show. And Bryan Broaddus, I respect you so much. And thank you for always investigating and educating everything.
That's a draft show reference right there. Thank you very much for those kind words.
And then Clement has a 2-part comment.
Okay.
He says, positive that they have the number talking about the contracts with CD, but the structure of the contract is the problem. As for Dak, I'm surprised that they will let him play the final year of his contract, so Dak can bet on himself and become a free agent in 2025 free agency.
Yeah.
I know that he hasn't delivered in the playoffs, but it is also the offense and defense that have led the team down in the playoffs. So I'll comment on that real quick.
Please do.
I 100% expect Dak Prescott to try to get to unrestricted free agency.
Yeah.
Especially after hearing the comments he made about the sense of responsibility that he felt to other quarterbacks in the league, and considering that the NFL has to approve contracts as well. Everything just kind of points to us being able, and by us I mean NFL fans, us being able to see the first top 10 unrestricted free agent quarterback since, honestly, I can't remember. I know it's been a while since we've seen this specific situation. So when it comes to the market for the quarterbacks in Dak's bracket, like, we really don't know what that looks like. And so if he really does feel a sense of responsibility to other guys in his position in the league, it only makes sense that he would step out there and be like, okay, let's see what this market is really like for people who perform the way I perform, which, despite what people say, is pretty good. I mean, you don't end up like as the runner-up in MVP conversations if you're trash. Yes, he's had disappointing moments. Yes, the playoffs were disappointing, but like, let's not act like that negates everything else that he's capable of.
Right. I'm going to guess Kirk Cousins was the first one that we saw that went from Minnesota.
I was thinking that.
He was tagged twice with the Commanders, and then got to free agency, and then signed the guaranteed contract, a big guaranteed contract with, I think it was well over $80 million with the Vikings. I think Kirk Cousins. I might be right about that.
That sounds accurate.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. Right?
I think we're both thinking the same thing between the two of us.
I'm just thinking of big time quarterbacks that have got. I'm sure that somebody, like I said, what was David Carr's situation too with the Saints? That wasn't a trade. That wasn't a trade. I'm trying to think of him leaving the Raiders. I think the Raiders just let him go, and then he moved on. I'm sure there's others, but the first one I remember was Kirk Cousins. I think I'm right about that.
All right. Mills said, the blessing in disguise is Lamb sitting out. My question is, how many wideouts do we keep?
Ooh,
5 or 6?
Yeah.
If 5, who has the edge? If 6, would y'all be fine with T-Bill and Cropper?
Man, that's a good, okay. When you look at these wide receivers, and man, I'm so glad your very astute crowd or followers asked that question, because I'm going through that right now, because I'm trying to figure out with Cropper, and I know just up the road from me here, from the practice fields is the personnel trailer. And I guarantee you they're talking about this right now, because if Cropper has shown up, and I'll say this about real quick, Billy Johnson has started off really, really, really well. I mean, he was like the talk of the camp. And then Cropper has since, I think, overtaken him with some of his play, because what happens with Cropper, it's a third down catch, it's a fourth down catch, it's a red zone catch, it's a touchdown catch. He has been really consistent with his play. Mm. And what happens with these wide receivers, them and the corners run more than anybody at practice. Their day is it's like being in the African jungle. It's run every day to eat, run to eat, run to eat, run to eat. And so that's what I've seen with Cropper. Billy Johnson, I mean, there's been some times where I kind of felt like, okay, Cropper was better today. And I mentioned some of the other guys too. Now Ryan Flournoy is starting to practice again. Okay, Ryan Flournoy, rookie drafted guy, good looking kid. Gosh, he's a good looking kid out there catching balls. Moves around well and all that. But he wasn't in the mix. Billy Johnson was getting a lot of work. Here's Cropper getting a lot of work. All of a sudden, David Durden all of a sudden has become a punt and kickoff return guy. Could he be the second punt return guy, kickoff return guy? Who is going to play special teams with this group? This is going to be a fun group to watch the next 3 weeks as we play these football games. Mm. Because what will happen is these players will cut themselves. And I mean that in a way. Everybody says, oh, well, the front office guy. No, they will lack consistency. They won't catch the ball. and they'll fade away. And the ones that don't are going to be the fifth or sixth guy. That's where
Yeah.
this is all going to play. It's always going to be that. And people were telling me, I do work with Bobby Belt on Love of the Star. And Bobby's like, well, Brian Durden was going to make the team last year until he blew out his knee. I'm like, really? Really?
Ooh.
But he's been super competitive. They keep an eye. That's our buzzword, our phrase that we use this time of year. Keep an eye on this receiver group, because positions, I really do believe positions 5, 6, 7. I mean, they fluctuate like day to day, and these games will probably tell you which one of these guys gets the opportunity to be on this football team.
That's one thing that I will say I do like about preseason games. It's like when it comes
you got to
to
show
scheme
up.
and things of that nature, like, okay, we're not going to gather a lot
Right.
based about the scheme and whatnot.
Right.
But when it comes to individuals in their positions, it's like when we watch footage from practice, you might see a guy have 1 or 2 good reps. And that's easy to pull off when you're just, doing a rep here and there.
Right.
But whenever you actually have to be on the field for a whole series and you actually have to play the game for 4 quarters, you get to see who can actually keep those skills up when they start getting tired, or when they start getting stressed, or when somebody who legitimately does not like them is talking trash in their face. There's so many more stressors, so many different stressors that they don't experience in a typical training camp day, that I'm like, okay, now we actually get to see a real game. Let's see who can actually keep running these routes in the fourth quarter, or who gets tired and starts lagging
Exactly.
behind. That's what I want to watch.
Exactly. There will be games where they will have to play 2-minute football, and you will see who will fade. I'll say this. Coming into camp, I didn't think that Jalen Tolbert had a lot of mental toughness to himself. He does. He has more than I thought.
This year, you didn't think he did?
No, I didn't know. Coming into training camp, I had my questions about him and Brooks. I thought Brooks was probably more of a mentally tough guy. Tolbert is a get his uniform dirty guy. He is a run all day guy. He is a get open guy. Those are all things he did at South Alabama. They were talking about drafting him here in the second round. There were people that absolutely loved him. And when he was picked, I'm like, oh, man, they got him one here. They got him one. And then, for the last couple of years, it's been kind of, the first year not so good, second year a little bit more. If you start to say, oh, potential breakout guys, you could probably tag this kid as a potential breakout guy. He has had some really, really good practices. And like as you said, who's tired? Who can run routes? Who can concentrate? Who can catch the football late? Who's going to get first downs? Who's going to make contested catches? Wide receivers will show you that in these games. That you will see. So all of a sudden, if Cropper's out there and he catches 4 balls for 57 yards, and you're going, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. That's what you look for in these games. You look for these guys that can run the football, or these guys that can catch the football. That's with John Stevens. Everybody in the practices were really good for John Stevens last year. And he started playing those games, and you're like, wow, this guy's making plays. He's going to be on the team. Oh, wow, he just got a knee injury. So there's some real opportunities for some of these guys starting tomorrow afternoon here in Los Angeles.
Well, I'm glad to hear that about Tolbert. I know last year a lot of people were talking about his confidence improving, so I thought it was there, but I guess it didn't really translate on the field the way you would have thought.
He's a
so
better
maybe we'll
player
see a
now.
little bit more on the field this year.
He's a better player right now, Jazz, than he was this time last year.
That's exciting.
He's had it in him. He just now has realized what he has to do. Maybe working with Dak in the Dak yard has helped his confidence in his understanding of what he needs to do. And there's been a lot of talk about, Cooks has had a really good camp too. Cooks has been, and everybody's kind of thinking, well, Cooks, Ferguson, you have an opportunity now. If you have, say you have Lamb, Ferguson, Cooks, Tolbert, now you're cooking with oil for that quarterback.
Nice. But yeah, that's really good to hear. And I think one of the things when it comes to young athletes and why it takes so many seasons for them to
Yeah.
develop, it's not just like the physical skills are obviously
Hmm.
part of it and acclimating to a new system, but like that mental part does make a big difference
Huge.
because you can tell every athlete, especially on the pro level, if you ask them if they're giving it all they've got, they're going to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes they don't really know what giving it all they've got
They
feels like
they think
until
they're giving it
they
all.
do
Yeah.
what they think is giving it all they've
Right.
got. And then they're
Right.
like, no, I actually have some left over. You
Right.
know, you
Right.
even hear people like Micah Parsons, like at the end of last season, he was talking about, things that he could have done better, things he
Mm-hmm.
could have done different. Sometimes you just don't know until you know.
Right.
All right, let's see. We're going to do two more. And then I have a couple more questions about the CD situation.
Okay.
Darren Posey asks, what are your thoughts on the RB room and the rumors of possibly bringing in more help at that position?
Yeah. Thank you, Darren, for the question. Really appreciate you listening to us tonight. The running back room is, me personally, I feel like Rico Dowdle is your best option at running back right now. And the question is always going to be about Rico Dowdle is his ability to stay healthy, is his availability. If you told me right now that Rico Dowdle was going to play 17 games, I would hand him the ball every single time. I think he's explosive. He's got the size. He catches it well. He understands the blitz pickup stuff. There's a lot of positive things about. Now, with Zeke looked really good the other day, and I mean looked good with the holes. He looked like he hit the holes with some power. There was not the explosiveness that you would see of Rico and maybe some others, but this room, could it be good enough? If they can kind of get this running game, if they get the offensive line, if it all of a sudden it's Guyton and Smith and Hoffman and Martin and Steele, if they could kind of figure out ways to scheme some runs, come off the ball, get into some people, let Rico Dowdle run a little bit, him stay healthy, maybe you could add another guy. I kind of feel like that, Mike McCarthy has really talked about Malik Davis a little bit. I know that Hunter Lipke is going to be involved. So you kind of have a feeling that Elliott, Dowdle, Lipke, now who's the fourth one? Is the fourth one Malik Davis? Is he on this squad? Is Nathaniel Pete? Nathaniel Pete's a little bit of a smaller guy. To be honest with you, Jazz, we haven't seen anything from Deuce Vaughn. He's dealt with
I was about to ask about him.
Yeah, he's dealing with the groin. And so how do you, in OTAs and mini camps and stuff, you were like watching them create plays for Deuce Vaughn. And Deuce Vaughn was telling us that he was playing in the slot and he was studying Cole Beasley tape and, he was trying to learn. And then he have a practice and the next thing you know, he's not practicing. And it's hard. That's a hard thing to have to deal with. If it's not, they can use Turpin in the running game some, which, I could say handing the ball to him. He's an explosive player. That might be opportunities, but, they've got to get, we'll see with the tight ends, better point of attack blocking. Can you get Schoonmaker going? Can you get Ferguson going? Stevens, can they block better, and I really like what they're doing with Hunter Lipke. So I look at the running back room. I think right now it's Zeke, Dowdle, Hunter Lipke, and now find me the fourth guy if they're going to add a fourth guy.
Okay, that's reasonable. I honestly think that is the best answer that we're going to get at this stage because we haven't really even seen enough to know, in my opinion, what it is that Mike McCarthy really wants from the run game this year.
Yeah, it might be lean on Dak Prescott really heavy. If they don't get that running game going, then it's going to turn into, okay, can Dak throw the ball 40 times a game, and are you just going to blow people away that way? And because you're maybe not going to run the ball. I don't know how bad the Rams defensive line was, front seven. They weren't good the other day. Dallas did a good job, and Dallas did a good job coming off the ball and making things happen and got some lanes. This game tomorrow afternoon, maybe some of the same stuff. Maybe some of the same stuff happening with the young guys on young guys tomorrow, and they could find ways to run the football. But they've got to, we always talk about balance. If they can run the ball well enough, they've got a quarterback that can play at a high level. the quarterback can make plays. There's no question about that. Help him with a running game and let these receivers and figure out who these receivers are going to be getting CD in camp. And I think offensively, you'll be fine.
Good. Real quick tangent question, and then I'll ask you the CD question. So last year we had that whole situation with the trimesters. Is there any indication that Mike McCarthy is doing that again, or now that it's their second year with the system, assuming that the system remains similar, are they just gonna like jump into it?
You hated that first trimester of offense last year, didn't you?
It was terrible. It was so hard to watch. I don't want to do it again.
No, it's very hard to watch. I think that to me, with Mike being back as the primary play caller, it looks like to me, we're not seeing all the creativity that I'm sure that they're going to have. I'm sure there's going to be some days where they're practicing some things, whereas the media, we don't get to watch. But I do like how Dak has been spot on with, and Mike Zimmer has not made this easy for this offense. He just hasn't. He's trying to get his guys to play sound. They're playing sound. Micah Parsons is kind of figuring out like, oh, I could do this, I could do that. The corners have been good. The safeties have been good. The linebacker room is a lot better. It's been a struggle, and I mean a struggle, or I shouldn't say a struggle. I should say it's been difficult. And Dak has shown up well. The receivers have shown up well. It's been a really good test for them. So I think Mike is getting into a little bit of rhythm. We got to on 105.3 The Fan, talked to Brian Schottenheimer, and I was asking him about stealing plays and stuff like that. And he says, there's ideas that you look at, there's schemes you look at, there's things you say, okay, well, we can do this a little bit better. Let's try this. So I anticipate that year 2 of Mike McCarthy calling plays will be better. And I think you got a quarterback that plays at a high level. And he looks like he is very, very comfortable, playing in the system where he takes a snap, he reads, he steps up, and he finds people open. He steps up, or he moves and finds people open. And I think that's, to me, Dak is there. There has been days where you're like, Dak's throwing the ball well right now. I think that's a great sign. I think it's a great sign when you get a quarterback and a play caller that seem to be in a little bit of rhythm, and especially they practice.
Absolutely.
They practice very fast. They're a very much a get to the line, run a play, get to the line, run a play. They don't just wait around and let's see that again. There's a lot of plays being run, and I think as a former scout, just evaluating the practices, the offensive practices, I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing so far. We'll see on the running game. The running game against the Rams encouraged me a little bit, but I still got to see some more.
100%. Speaking of being impressed, Clement asks, and this will be the last question from the chat for now.
Yeah.
Besides Kalen Carson, who is impressing in training camp? Who has been impressive on defense?
Yeah, that's a really good question as well. And you got some good followers with these questions.
I love them.
Yeah, the linebacker room, I think overall, when you look at, it's easy to say Micah Parsons because he could wreck shop anytime, so I won't say that. I really do like what they've done with Damone Clark. Damone Clark, and I'm not saying this because he's an alum like me from LSU, but I'm saying last year Damone Clark didn't look like a football player that knew what he was doing. I feel like now with this linebacker room, the way they have it, it's no longer that big dime package where they're relying on Curse and Bell and others to have to play down in the box. They misevaluated the room last year. They got injured with Leighton Vander Esch, and now he's gone, having to retire. That's unfortunate. Leighton Vander Esch, a career cut short, just like Sean Lee, career cut short. Very good linebackers. But now the addition of, when you look at Eric Kendricks, has been a blessing so far as helping the others. I think these linebackers are picking up quick. Overshown, Clark, Leofau. I was very critical of the Leofau pick because I felt like they needed a running back. I felt like that maybe that was a spot that they could have grabbed a running back, and they grabbed Leofau. He's been really, really good, and so even they added this Willie Harvey from the UFL, and he's played at a very, very high level. They go out and they've added some guys. Nick Virgil is a veteran player. They added him this past week. kind of a special teams guy, good cover guy. Kind of a guy that's going to, like I say, play more special teams and probably play defensive snaps. But they've had a room that's really stepped up and made an impression on me, because I was thinking like, okay, here's a question mark. Here's the question mark. What's going to happen with this linebacker room? I would say it's one of the strengths of what the defense is doing right now. And so every one of those guys that name, and you start to ask, hey, who's had an impressive camp on defense? These linebackers have been, I think, really, really good. And you'll probably see them make some plays for you tomorrow afternoon.
Well, that's good news.
Yep.
One thing that I will say is that when it comes to player versatility, I think that's something that can make a coordinator kind of lazy,
Mm-hmm.
and that was part of the criticism that I had of Dan Quinn last season,
Sure.
is that I felt like when it came to what the defense was doing, it was so easy to rely on Micah to make the big plays. And that kind of distracted a lot of people from what wasn't going well with the
Right.
defense. And now I think we're seeing a situation where it's like, oh, Damone Clark can actually play inside and outside. And
Mm-hmm.
instead of just using that to cover up flaws, it's
Right.
like, how can we actually use that to our advantage and use that strategically? And same thing with Micah. Instead of just allowing him to go out there and impress and be like, okay, well, he's going to make big plays. And so whatever is going wrong won't matter as much. It's like, no, we're
Mm-hmm.
actually going to figure out, how to strategically use him in a different way. And it's like the difference is subtle, because either way you can describe it as player versatility, player flex. But there is a difference in how you apply those concepts. And so I've probably heard more about the defense than I've actually watched so far this summer. But based on what I've heard, that seems to be a big difference in Zim's approach compared to DQ.
Yeah. They are the accountability, the ability to play your assignment, your ability to play the position with some smarts, not take chances. It's a sound front. It's a sound linebacking crew. They cover well. They disguise well. They're probably better equipped not to give up big plays. Will they have the turnovers that they've had in the past? Maybe not, but they're not going to give up big plays. I don't believe, with the way Mike plays his secondary and his linebackers. And if you get Micah involved, Tank involved, they've got to figure out, Jazz, about this one technique situation. They've got to figure it out. And maybe both defensive tackles. I know with Osa, I've always kind of felt like that Osa for 13 weeks was a really good player. Week 14, week 15, he started kind of, get tired because he plays at such a high level and he plays so hard. They've got to figure out what's going on with that defensive tackle room. And it might be watching other teams right now. But they letting Hankins go, I think was a big loss for them. Because they need that safety net at one technique. Mozzie has shown up some. Mozzie needs to be more consistent. If Mozzie's more consistent, then they'll be better off. They added a defensive tackle, Huggins. From the Falcons, he's probably more of a 3 technique than a 1 technique. Maybe it's a situation where they're looking at it and saying, okay, if Huggins can help us at the backup 3, and then we can move Golston maybe back over to end, then we can maybe help us to be a little bit better there. I mean, Nealon has done a really nice job. I think Nealon's going to start at the right end for you. He's going to start opposite of Tank, and so they've if you have to replace Sam Williams, but Nealon looks like he could play the run, and he's developing as a pass rusher. Maybe he's not the pass rusher that Sam Williams is, but he plays the run better, I believe. So that's a positive on that side. But the depth there is not as good as it once was with Armstrong and Fowler and guys like that.
And some interesting feedback about Osa. I'm actually have to keep my eye on that this season. I never
Yeah.
really thought about it that way.
Yeah, he is. You watch him, it's almost like he's a college player where they play really, really hard for 14 weeks and then it's the bowl game, that kind of thing. And But he does. He plays so hard, and he's trying. His conditioning is good, but he just plays so hard. He wears down, and he's not as noticeable in week 14, 15, 16. It's happened to him the last couple of years, and I think he's trying to. We interviewed him on 105.3 The Fan, and he was talking about the endurance and things like that. But he's a good player, man. And he's under contract year too, so he if not here, somewhere else. That's how you got to kind of look at that.
I hope it's here. Speaking of things that happen here, you've been around the Cowboys organization for a long time.
14 years.
14 years. That's a long time.
Well, I worked
compared to
for
most
14
of us.
Yeah, I worked it for 14 years, yeah.
And I know you gave us some information earlier about CD's contract and how they've got the numbers and they're working on the structure.
Sure.
But with it being that you've been around the organization so long and you've kind of seen how Jerry handles things, Jerry Jones, how he handles things over the years.
Yeah.
When you hear comments like the one that he made about not having a sense of urgency, I saw some media members who were like, oh, these negotiations are getting personal because they took that as a shot.
Mm-hmm.
And another comment that he made last week, they took both those comments as shots against CeeDee Lamb. Mm-hmm. How do you interpret stuff like that when you hear it?
Well, it's interesting because I've kind of felt like that he went after Zeke with Zeke who. He went after Zach Martin a bunch, and I think he was more critical of Zach Martin than he was anybody that he's dealt with in his contract stuff. It seems like that Jerry is critical, and then all of a sudden they find a way to get the deal done. You could take him a couple of different ways. If you want to look at it as Jerry drawing the line in the sand, the Cowboys have had a little history, Jazz, of being cavemen. And we use that on 105.3, The Fan in the front office. We call them the cavemen because what do? Contracts, they cave. So, Jerry might be in a situation where he's like, listen, I hear what people are saying about us. In the agent community, it's, well, just hold out. Wait, they'll cave. Just wait, they'll cave. And if you take it as Jerry is drawing the line in the sand, as a general manager, he is the owner and the general manager. So having, he could take that stance because he's not going anywhere. I know people out there like, you're telling us, Broaddus, he ain't going anywhere. Okay. But if you, as a general manager, he's not going anywhere with job security. So all of a sudden it's like, if you want to draw the line in the sand, he is maybe betting that CeeDee Lamb will not miss game checks. CeeDee Lamb is due $17 million this year. He is betting that CeeDee Lamb will not miss $1 million a week to sit out. He won't. And that's what he might. And now, that's if you believe that Jerry's drawn the line in the sand. Or you could believe that it was a tongue-in-cheek comment and that Jerry was, much like he was saying with Zeke and all the things he said about Zach Martin and all that was just kind of, Jerry being Jerry. Just depending on which way you go. I do feel like from talking to some people that they're working on this. That encourages me. If I was a Cowboy fan, that would encourage me. If the things I'm hearing are that numbers seem to be in place, but how we structure. I think it's important for all their contracts. They're going to have a huge outlay of contracts these next 3 that they do. And then think about Tyler Smith coming up and others. They've got to figure out how to get these things staggered where they just don't, where the outlay is just not so much, where they can kind of figure those things out. So I've worked with Jerry for a long time, and this might be one of those times where you could say, yeah, it's tongue in cheek, but I also feel like there's a side deep down side. He's tired of Bryan Broaddus and the media saying, well, the cavemen are going to cave again. Get ready. Cavemen, cave. People act like that players and front office and stuff don't hear what we're saying. Trust me, someone's watching your podcast right now. Someone will be watching your podcast with, as we talk about these things.
I believe it.
Oh no, it
especially with you
happens.
talking about contracts
Oh no,
and about
question.
what to expect tomorrow. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's definitely somebody
Yeah.
who's
I can't tell
watching.
you. I can't tell you how many times I've been on the radio and said something on 105.3 The Fan, and I get a text message from somebody just after I said it. They
Mm.
listen. They listen. They pay attention. If a player ever tells you I block it all out, no. Dak Prescott, there's a side of me that believes that maybe Dak Prescott looks at this situation and he goes, I'm tired of waking up every morning and seeing my face on ESPN to start the day,
Oh Lord.
in a way of this. And then the next show after that. And then the next show after that. And then I turn it on Fox and then they're talking about me still. You know? Yeah, I think that, to me, we're all human. Nobody wants to hear anybody say anything bad or negative about us. Nobody does. And, there might be a side of Dak Prescott. It's like, listen, I could go somewhere else and be the quarterback. I can go and get my money and be somewhere else and, maybe have an opportunity to do something different where I don't have to deal with all this. I think Dak has been very resilient through all this, to be honest with you.
Absolutely.
He has been, and I know there's a lot of people that don't like Dak Prescott. I get it. If you don't like it, it's fine. You're talking to a guy right now that I would have killed to have Dak Prescott as our quarterback in the early 2000s when we were 5-11 every damn year. We didn't have a quarterback. I would have killed to have a guy like this playing quarterback. I'd still be working today if that was the case. I'd still be in scouting if that was the case. But it is. He's taken a lot of arrows for this team. He's the one guy that stood up there when things were falling apart a little bit, and he had to take the arrows. Now, does he have to play better in the playoffs? Yeah. Does the team have to play better? Yeah. Does Mike McCarthy have to coach better? Yeah. There's a lot of things. Does Jerry Jones have to help the roster be better in the playoffs? Yeah. They could all take a turn at bat for what's happened the last 30 years here.
Yeah, I mean, that is a different way of looking at it. I think sometimes whenever conversations like this end up in the public space, people try to simplify it as much as possible. Obviously, that makes it easier to talk about.
Yeah.
But when you really get down to it, yeah, like you just said, there's so many different people who have played a role in what we're seeing
There have
right
been.
now, and
Yeah.
there's blame to go around.
Yeah, there's blame and there's credit. I mean, they've won 36 games. I mean, let's be honest with you. I've been super critical of Mike McCarthy. I've worked in two organizations that Mike McCarthy has worked in. I have friends, and I know Mike McCarthy. So I think that Mike McCarthy's trying to make his team tougher now by the way they're practicing a little bit more better. Yes, I do. I think it's not, I don't call it a sense of urgency because I think Mike's like, listen, I've got to do something a little bit different than what I've done in the past. And the way he's working his team, and maybe there haven't been the days of coddling his team. There's been some physical practices here. There's probably a time where Mike McCarthy wanted nothing to do with working with another team. Why do I want to work for another team? My team's good enough. They can work. No, he took the opportunity to work against another team. He's trying to do some things differently here, and maybe that'll help. Maybe that will help them get over the hump. If it doesn't, Mike McCarthy's a big boy. He knows he's going to be somewhere else, But like I said, and this is one of my go-to phrases, him winning 36 games here, if he won 36 games in Atlanta, Carolina, Phoenix, one of those places, they'd have a damn statue in front of the stadium of him, Here, he's fighting for his job, but that's where we're at now. It's 30 years of, I'll tell you this, Jazz, I feel like there's more frustration towards the Joneses than there is towards Mike McCarthy. I really do believe that. This fan base, I feel it. I feel the frustration. And I think that Green Bay loss was bad for a lot of people that are Cowboy fans last year. That was a hard one. Philadelphia falls completely apart. You win the division. You get the second seed. You throw a big stinker against the Packers, who are the 7th seed. That was hard for a lot of people. And
It was.
It makes it difficult to try and get back on that horse for this season. And I think the front office knows that. And I think there's a lot of fans out there that are not happy with Jerry and Stephen Jones. And they're big boys too. They'll take it, but they got to know their fan base is hey. something's got to change. Something's got to be different this year, and we'll see if it is.
Based on the general discourse, I'm inclined to agree with you. I do
Yeah,
feel like I've heard a lot more gripes, a lot more
sure.
complaints, a lot more criticism of the Joneses than of Mike McCarthy. And I hadn't
Hmm.
really thought about what that meant until now, but I think you have a really good point there.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to ask you something real quick, partly because I didn't get to do Fangirl Friday yesterday because of my voice, and partly because you brought up what's happening with other teams.
Yeah.
Because Cowboys fans, we get really caught up in what's going on over here.
We do
But
focus. Yeah, we do focus.
for those of you who have been following national headlines, you know that a really big story came out recently, or an expose, you might actually want to call it, about this strained relationship between Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. And I just wanted to get your opinion on that real quick, because essentially what the article was saying was that what a lot of people were seeing in terms of last season, there was a lot of criticism of them about supposedly not being on the same page,
Yeah.
or, Jalen Hurts not really respecting Nick Sirianni as a coach and things of that nature. Um, and then, of course, they came out in the press conferences last week and they're like, oh, well, media's got to find something to write about.
Mm,
We have the goal of getting back to the Super Bowl, blah, blah, blah.
mm.
Just trying to like sweep it under the rug. And I'm like, no, we saw what we saw. Like, what are your thoughts when you see things like that play out in the media?
Yeah. If I'm Howie Roseman, I'm trying my best to listen. Okay, guys, we don't need a repeat of last season. That was a team that was 10-1 and completely fell apart at the end. They had first-time coordinators, both relieved of their duty after the season. The collapse against Tampa. It was just a terrible season. For what they started off, that team looked like it was, going to be the number one seed in the NFC, and just completely fell apart. Got in the playoffs, limped in the playoffs. But yeah, there's a side about, I think, Nick Sirianni, and I don't know Nick Sirianni all that well. Never met the man. There's a lot of these coaches I do know, but Nick I don't know all that well. I think Nick is he's a very much a chip on the shoulder guy. He takes on the persona, and I worked in Philadelphia, and you're talking to a guy that never told anybody in Philadelphia that I was from Dallas, Texas. I said I was from every place but Dallas, Texas, because of the fan base there and how critical they hate people from Dallas. They do not like Dallas at all. So, but Nick kind of wears that badge of being a Philly fan, and being the Philly and the tough guy and all that, and Jalen Hurts is, to me, is a guy that seems very much like he keeps to himself. He doesn't really like all that talk. He doesn't like that being out there like that. He wants to be coach. He's been at some outstanding programs. If you look at his college career, University of Alabama, then Oklahoma, the way he was able to play, he was outstanding. And so he's been around good coaches. He knows what high level coaching is, and here he's
That's
got
a good point.
he's got first year coordinators, and Mike Johnson and all that. He's kind of worked with Mike. He likes Mike, but Mike was over his head calling plays. And so that's something that he had to deal with. And he's got a head coach that's kind of trying to cover some things, and maybe he wants to be a little bit more conservative, and he's kind of talking to his coordinator. And I'm interested to see, and here's that word interested again. I'm interested to see how the relationship with him and Kellen Moore works out.
Oh,
Because
so am I.
and we've seen Kellen Moore have great success. We've seen him. I mean, this offense from the Cowboys has been a top 5 offense. If he has, he's got Saquon Barkley, he's got all those talented receivers. Dallas Goedert at wide receiver. Their offensive line is a good one. Can Kellen Moore, can he kind of put things all together and get everybody on the same page? Because when it
A
was
lot of people
yeah, go ahead.
a lot of people seem to believe he can.
That he can't,
And I'm going to be honest, when they talk about what they're expecting to see from Kellen Moore this
yeah,
season, I don't understand where they're getting that stuff from, because I'm like, are y'all talking about the same guy who was here?
yeah,
and I don't know if it's maybe because he did so much statistically
Yeah.
that for a lot of these pundits to really break down the decisions that he
Hmm.
made, if it would like break their brains. Because
Yeah.
when people start like breaking statistical records, a
Sure.
lot of times people don't also want to talk about them sometimes making bad decisions, because then
Right.
that kind of flips everything about how they, put people who break records on a pedestal, like it
Hmm.
flips all that on its head, and then they'd have
Yeah.
to challenge everything,
Yeah.
But I'm just like, especially when they're like, oh yeah, they've got Kellen Moore and Saquon
Yeah.
Barkley. I'm like, I don't remember Kellen Moore being that great when it came to orchestrating the run game.
See,
Like, why are y'all
yeah,
excited about him having a weapon
that's
like Saquon Barkley?
yeah, that's the deal right there. How will he use the? I think the bigger picture, and I think you're absolutely right. The Saquon Barkley thing seems to be like, okay, you're adding a big time piece, but will Kellen Moore use Saquon Barkley the right way to
And
be
I
a
don't think
weapon?
he will.
He might not. And I'll tell you what, there might be a problem with how he calls his plays if he's asking Jalen Hurts to throw the ball the way he has. Now, if you listen to practices, and there's a couple of Philly guys that I follow, Elliott Shore Parks is the biggest cheerleader ever for Philadelphia. He's WIP, which is a sister station of ours in our Odyssey group. But Elliott Shore is like, Jalen Hurts is looking great. He's throwing the ball, no interceptions. And I'm like, okay, fine. That's good. I just wonder, like, it seems to me that Jalen Hurts is a throw the ball down the field guy. And I don't know if Kellen Moore is a throw the ball down the field guy. Will Kellen Moore play to the strengths of Jalen Hurts and play to the strengths of Saquon Barkley? My biggest fear as a Cowboy fan that all of a sudden that Saquon Barkley decides to be healthy like Christian McCaffrey's healthy with San Francisco and playing 17 weeks. Every week, every time you played the Giants, there was always questions about Saquon Barkley playing and was he going to play? Is he going to play? And now I'm worried about, oh my gosh, they just made this trade and he's going to get healthy like Christian McCaffrey and he's never going to get hurt and he's going to have 128 yards rushing every game, that kind of thing. So I don't know. I think there's some questions I have, but Nick Sirianni, when you start to talk about the coordinators, it's so weird about this division this year. If you said hot seat coaches, three of the four coaches in this division, I would think would be on the hot seat: McCarthy, Brian Daboll at the Giants, and Nick Sirianni with Philadelphia.
Agreed.
They are all on the hot seat. And here's Dan Quinn, and the only reason Dan Quinn's on the hot seat is because he just got the job with the Commanders. So it's going to be there's going to be some celebration at the end of this, and there's going to be a lot of moving vans pulling into houses and moving coaches around if it doesn't work out for some of these guys.
Oh, absolutely. And as far as Nick Sirianni and Kellen Moore, when I first heard about Moore going to the Eagles, I was
Yeah.
just like, okay, so what's the over under on how many times Kellen Moore cries this season?
Yeah.
Because like I just don't see those two personalities working well together.
It'll be but I'll tell you what, Vic Fangio being there too, and Vic Fangio, we got a taste of Vic Fangio last year when Dallas played the Miami Dolphins. And then we've also got a taste of Vic Fangio when he was the head coach with the Denver Broncos. And kind of, they came into AT&T. So Vic Fangio is a very good defensive coordinator. Will he make the difference, though, of what the Philadelphia Eagles need? The Eagles have had a great history of defensive coordinators, and I just kind of hope that maybe that these coordinators kind of fall apart a little bit. That's the Dallas Cowboy fan in me, but they've got a talented roster. They really, really do. They've got to figure some things out on defense. But if Vic Fangio does, then we'll probably see the Eagles being right there with the Cowboys battling for the division.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to post something up on the screen real quick, and then we'll get some final thoughts, and then we'll get out of here. So I'm pulling this up because earlier we were talking about everything that the Cowboys have to manage in terms of contracts outside of what's just been brought up in the headlines. And so I just want people to kind of see this. So this is from Over the Cap.
Yeah.
they get a good amount of their information correct. I don't know if it's
They do.
100%,
No.
but they get a good
They're
amount of
good.
their information
They're good
correct.
to use. That's a good one to
Yes.
use. That's a good one.
So what I want people to look at is this free agent column that's over here to the right. Obviously, we're in 2024. We know Stephon Gilmore is not with the team right now. Michael Gallup, Jaron Curse, they're not, right? Then when you click on 2025, like, look how long this list gets, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, some of these people might be cut, but like, even when deciding like who to cut, who to keep, like how much to pay them, that is a heck of a lot of people to like deal with.
Yeah.
Just to manage. And so it's like, when they say that they're trying to work out things with Lamb, they also have to keep in mind like all of these names. Now, if you look at our active roster right now, it says 91 people. So obviously a lot of these names are going to be off before we even get to 2025.
Right.
So I get that. But I'm just saying some of these names we can anticipate still being around. CeeDee Lamb, Ezekiel Elliott, Oso Digizua, Chauncey Golston, Chuma Edoga. Like,
yeah,
there's just so many people that you have to balance whenever we're talking about the numbers for one player. It's like there's a domino effect that affects a heck of a lot of people. Cooper Rush is on this list, like we talked about earlier. Nashawn Wright's already gone, so they'll probably update that tomorrow. But y'all get what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I always hated, like when I was in personnel, I respect the cap guys and gals, but I had zero interest in trying to navigate that. My job was like to bring players. Like, hey, listen, I got a guy for you. We can't afford him, Brian. Oh, okay, thank you. Hey, I got a guy for you. Okay, how much is it? Well, talk to his guy, see what we have to do. I was always the guy that was like, I was just sit in my office and watch film and talk about adding players, and then, and then it would be like, no, we can't do this, or we can't, or yeah, we can do this, or we can structure it this way. And so I admire the guys and gals around the league that do the cap stuff, because just what you showed our audience there, they have spreadsheets of that. They have absolutely. Now, I'm going to run something by you that I think might be interesting, and it might not. People on our platform here might just say, this is stupid, Brian. I would say this to Dak Prescott. If you've listened to me on some other platforms, I've said this, but I think it might draw some interest here. If I'm Stephen Jones and he said this, he goes, we've had conversations with Dak. We've actually had conversations with Dak himself, which doesn't always happen. Usually when hey, my agent handles this, I don't want to deal with this, you talk to my agent. Well, Stephen Jones kind of gave us a little insight that he goes, hey, I've talked to Dak Prescott. We've had conversations. This is what I would do if I was Stephen Jones. I would bring Dak in, and I would do just what you did for me. I would show this to Dak. I would show a presentation. Like, listen, you're going to win this negotiations. You're going to win it. You've got the leverage. You got no trade. You're going to be a free agent. If we don't do something, how bad do you want to win these negotiations with us? How bad do you want to win it? Do you want to win it $60 million? Do you want to win it $58 million? Do you want to win it at $55 million? Do you want to win it at $52 million? I would show him exactly what you just did to me. I would show him the team and how it's going to look while he's the quarterback of it at his current number. It's not his responsibility. He doesn't owe the Cowboys any break on contract, but I would say this. I'm like, listen, we're going to pay you here, but this is what our team is going to look like if you're okay with it. And if you're okay with it, then we're fine. But I just want to let you know this is where we're at. This team is not going to have this guy, and it's not going to have this guy, and it's not going to have this guy. If you want to do that, now we'll draft our ass off and try and fill those holes the best we can. But we're not probably going to have some of the guys depending on where you structure this deal for us. And I would just let him know. He doesn't owe me anything, but I want him to know just what you showed me. Hey, this is what it's going to look like in 2025. This is what it's going to look like in 2026. This is what it's going to look like in 2027. this is how we're going to be structured. And, we project the cap to do this and, player salaries to do this. But I would point it out to him and just say, if you're comfortable with this, here we are. If you want to give us a break on something, here we are. This is what our team can be. Or if you don't want to give us a break, well, this is what our team is probably going to look like. And maybe give him a little bit better understanding of where we're at. And he could say, screw you guys. I'm going to go and sign with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for $60 million, and I'm not going to worry about this anymore. I'm going to go to the New York Giants and sign for $60 million. I'm not going to worry about this anymore. I'm going to go to the Vegas Raiders for $60 million. I'm not going to worry about this anymore. But I would, if I was Stephen Jones, I would try and talk to him in that way. Just let him know, hey, you won this. But this is what we're going to be when you sign. And see what he says to that. It might make his decision even like, well, I don't want to be a part of this. And then, okay, Stephen can go, well, okay, then we're going to have $40 million of dead money next year, and then we're going to have to do something else. We'll figure it all out from there. If he doesn't want to be here anymore. I mean, he doesn't have to tell you that, but you can maybe tell by his reaction whether he's like, I'm not interested in your problems in 2025 and 2026 and 2027. Not interested. And that would probably tell you that, okay, we're not going to get this guy back is what we're going to do. Might help you a little bit making plans going forward.
From that perspective, I think we can say that however this gets handled will tell us a lot about who Dak Prescott is as a person and what he values.
He's dad now. He's got a family. He takes care of his family off the field, in a lot of ways. He's got a lot of really good side hustles he does. He's a squeaky clean guy in a lot of ways. People like being around him. He stands up there and takes all the arrows when the arrows are fired in his direction. He's holding all the cards right now. He really, really is holding all the cards. And so the Cowboys, they could be in a situation where they're like, well, we're just going to let this play out. And we'll see how bad he wants to be here, after the season's over. They've got till, I think, March 12th, 13th before the league year starts. They could probably try and get something done before then. If not, then you and I are going to be talking about a different quarterback during the draft. Or we'll be talking about signing Trey Lance or something like that.
Oh, goodness. I'm not looking forward to either of those conversations.
Hey, we're not doing Cincinnati Bengal football right now. Well, I take that back. They got to sign Chase and some guys. So anybody we're not doing Arizona Cardinal football right now. So yeah, this is the job we chose, right? This is the profession we chose.
All right. On that note, one last question.
Sure.
So let's say I'm not quite a casual fan.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did it make sense what I was just talking about? Did it make sense that bringing Dak in?
It did. And I was actually wondering, as you were saying it, I was like, I wonder if maybe they've done that already.
I would wonder it too.
It makes me wonder, is Dak already aware?
Yeah, that's what
I don't know.
I would try. Dak, like I said, Dak is holding all the cards. But if I was Stephen Jones, I would tell him, like, okay, you're going to win. You're going to win this negotiations, but here's how we have to do it. And we talked about structure. We talked about structuring deals. If you tell me that I could structure it this way, maybe we can save some of these guys. Maybe I'm not going to lose some of these guys. Maybe I could help you. I'm going to draft for you. I'm going to try and help you that way, but maybe you can help me. But I just wonder, I just feel like, to me, Steven's really got, if you lay your cards on the table and tell him, like, okay, fine, if you want to be here, you want to win it, how bad? Sure, I could pay you $60 million, but I'm just giving you an idea what this team is going to look like when I pay you $60 million. I think that's a partnership right there. That is a partnership. So I interrupted you. You had a question for me, or you had a comment.
No, you're good. I'm actually following up on what you said. Let's say hypothetically, Stephen Jones has already done this. Mm-hmm. Like, he's already talked to Dak about what the team might look like if he gets $60 million. Right. It's like, okay, so then I have two questions.
Yeah.
If $60 million is not the number, then what is the number?
Yeah.
And if that's what the team is going to look like, is that a responsibility that Dak should take on?
No.
Or should he say, like, no, I have to do right by other
Yeah.
quarterbacks in the league. I can't set this
Sure.
precedent that I
Yeah.
have to take a hit because of the past decisions of the team's owners.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to me, I just pointed out, you're right. He and I said it earlier, he owes this team nothing. But I think as a general manager, which Stephen Jones essentially is, and in charge of the player personnel stuff, I think you owe it to Dak to at least have that conversation. Hey, you don't owe me anything, but I'm just telling you as a partner, as a potential future partner, this is what I'm up against. And Dak could say, that ain't my damn fault, Steven. That's your problem. That's not okay. We're good. I'm just letting you know. If we offer you this deal and you sign it, this is where we're at. Don't. This is. I've told you. This is what we're going to try and do. I can't tell you the future, but I can show you how I've got things kind of laid out potentially for the future. And you're absolutely right. Dak does not owe them anything, and he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to give in. He's holding all the cards. Just as a partner, I would give Stephen Jones. As Stephen Jones, I would do that or try to.
And IMC said, but Broaddus, what have the Cowboys front office shown over the past 3 seasons to prove they'll go all in? I'm so sick of that phrase. And then he followed up and says, how can we trust the Cowboys will use a discount on good players?
Well, that's what I'm saying. No, they're good players it doesn't all have to be go out and sign a guy from the Buccaneers or go sign a guy from the Rams or go sign a guy from the Raiders. They've got 3 players right now. All 3 players that they're trying to sign, they drafted. They drafted 3 players that are all about to be potentially the top paid at their position. It's not about going out and you're using the money to sign Tyler Smith, who is a badass left guard. You're using that money to go sign another guy you drafted, Jake Ferguson, before he becomes he's going to be a badass tight end and someone's going to want him. It's not always about going out and spending the money. It's spending the money on your own. That's the Cowboy way. But they've shown you though. They went out and traded. They got the Houston Texans to take half of Cook's contract, gave a 5th round pick for him. He's one of your better receivers. There's ways of doing this without going out and throwing a bunch of money at a free agent guy. If they used the money in order to sign Tyler Smith, I think Dak Prescott would be effing elated about that. If they went out and used the money to sign Jake Ferguson, I think Dak Prescott would be effing elated about that. If they went out and used the money to pay Micah Parsons, I think Dak Prescott would be effing elated about that. How about Bland? How about using the money on him? How about paying him a little bit? There's going to be guys that they're going to have to pay their own, but that's one of the things. They need to get back on, and it looks like this year maybe they got back on the track of drafting good players. 2 years ago, there's been no help yet. No help. But what have they done? When you look at using the money, who's to say if they sign their own guys, that's just as good as free agency. You're signing the top rated players. I mean, like I said, three players are about to get done or have to do are all going to be probably the tops at their position. Do you want anybody else? Or do you want to pay these guys at the tops of their position? That's the question.
That's valid. That's valid.
Yeah. But I just think there's ways to creatively do things. They are concerned about, as you did the spreadsheet, they're concerned about what's going to happen in 26 and 27 and 28. They should be. Yeah. And maybe they'll get the opportunity to go, but we look at free agency as we have to go out and get somebody else. Well, not when you have the 3 top players at a position on your roster, do you? Yeah, that's what I'm
And
saying.
I'm just going for it and looking at like 27, 28. I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah, that list is still pretty long to
yeah,
say that we're only in 2024, you know.
yeah.
Um I think what I'm hoping, because I'm all about the win-win. I'm hoping that
Mm-hmm.
Dak can get the number that he deserves,
Sure,
and that maybe it can be structured in a way where he
absolutely,
can stay if he wants to stay.
absolutely.
And especially with it being that he's going to be, the whole 40 million in 2025 anyway, maybe
Right.
that's a little bit more feasible than everybody believes it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I can also see how, with them already dealing with that situation, the Joneses would want to get out of the habit of just like kicking that can down the road over and over again.
That
So
is,
I'm
yeah.
pretty sure
There's,
that's going to be tough for
yeah,
them to
yeah. That's a
work out.
tough thing. That's a tough thing because, I talked to Andrew Brandt, who used to do contracts for the Packers back in the day, Brett Favre and those kind of contracts. He's done a lot of big contracts. And, I was asking him and like, hey, it's really no skill to keep flipping switches. Is it necessary? Sure. It's a way to do things, sure. But you keep kicking the can, kicking the can, kicking the can. He goes, the really good ones at this business create contracts that are good for the client and good for you without keep pushing money, keep pushing money, keep pushing money. Be creative with your contracts. And sometimes it's difficult, but Dallas seems to have this ability to flip switch, flip switch, flip switch. And now it's, there's more money down the road, so
Exactly.
yeah,
And so
that's,
this is another good feature that Over the Cap has, where it says click here to show itemized dead money.
yeah.
You can kind of see, well, not kind of, you can see the dead money
Yeah.
that the Cowboys are having to deal with. And
Right.
so some of these names, like if you're a new fan, you're like, who is that? Like
Mm-hmm.
D'Angelo Mandel? Now that's only $2,000,
Yeah.
right? But it's just an example of how there are people who are long gone who
Yeah.
are still counting against the cap.
Right.
So we've got Michael Gallup on here, Dorrance Armstrong is on here, Leighton Vander Esch is on here, Kelvin Joseph is
Mm-hmm.
accounting for a little bit over of $250,000. And so it's just like these things start to add up.
Yep.
So I can totally see the Joneses being like, we've got to get out of this habit.
Yeah.
Because even in 2025, we're already at 8 million
Right.
and they haven't even started like finalizing everything yet.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, at some point they're going to have to like tie up some of these loose ends and break that habit.
Yeah.
But the question that I was going to try to get to a second ago, just to kind of wrap things up.
Okay.
So let's say I'm a little bit of an above average fan. And
Yeah.
so I'm not like in the weeds and I don't know everybody who's on the roster and who's on the
Mm-hmm.
depth chart and everything. I'm not watching all the training camp footage,
Mm-hmm.
but I am enough of a fan to keep up with the headlines. I know what's going on. What is something I should be excited about during this preseason and going into the regular season?
I think you should be excited that even without CeeDee Lamb, that some wide receivers stepped up, that guys that you needed to show that they potentially could play here. I think you needed to see that Tolbert steps up. I think you should be excited that at left tackle, that Guyton, the early reps that he's gotten, whether it's against Micah Parsons, whether it's against Tank Lawrence, or anybody that's gone with him over there, on the defensive, Nealon, those kind of guys. It's been a positive, and there was questions about his, what was going to happen at left tackle. It looks like to me that Hoffman is going to be the starter at center, but BB's showing some decent stuff. But just in general, as a fan, you should be happy about the reports on your quarterback too, because your quarterback's playing at a very, very high level in practice. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that because they just don't like Dak. That's fine if you don't. But he's the quarterback of this team. And if they sign him, great. If they don't, I'm sure fans feel, whatever. Save the money, move on. He's a loser in the playoffs, blah blah blah. But if you're just a fan, you should be excited about his camp. You should be excited about Mike Zimmer stepping in and taking over the defense. Dan Quinn did a damn good job. The last view of Dan Quinn wasn't very good, but for the most part, for 3 years, Dan Quinn gave us all hope that when we were playing these games. I mean, like I said, they've won 36 games, and I think a lot of organizations would take that, but not having Dan Quinn, I think that to transition from Dan to Mike Zimmer, I think Cowboy fans are going to be happy about that. So if you're the casual fan, your quarterback, the defensive coordinator, and the possibility, like I said, of some other positions, the linebacker room, the receiver room, those rooms improving, I think are things that you should be happy about.
Agreed on all points. I'll say this. I grew up a Saints fan in Louisiana, and I still keep up with them. And I saw a headline about Spencer Rattler and Derek Carr. And I would much rather have Dak Prescott as my quarterback than have my choices be Spencer Rattler or Derek Carr. So I'll just say, I don't consider myself a casual fan, but I will say that I am very excited about the fact that despite all the stuff that's going on, first of all, every franchise has their issues. They just
some
don't
more than others
as much as the Cowboys.
Some more than others.
But I'm excited that we still have a very talented roster.
You do.
And there's a legitimate argument to be made that we're going to have another winning season and make the playoffs again. And, once the Cowboys get there, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the roster, it probably lost a little depth to it, but you've got some pieces in place that potentially could make up for the loss of where you're at or what you lost. So that in itself is I think something we always say, hey, keep an eye on this summer as we get through. We've got a little bit of camp left out here in California. We've got 2 preseason games. I'm sure we'll be all over those games, but this is where now it starts to turn into, okay, who is going to be on this 53-man roster? And by the time we leave this place, on the 21st to the 22nd of August, I think you're going to have an idea who that will be.
100%. Well, this has been a great conversation. We have got to do this again at some point.
Absolutely.
It's almost midnight here, so it's about time for me to get ready for bed. But thank you so much for joining me tonight and for sticking around for so long. Thanks to everybody in the comments who brought some great questions tonight. Much appreciated. Thank you, Formula 44448888 for my first super chats ever.
Hey, more of those to come.
More to come. And thanks to everybody for watching. This has been another episode of Bitches Love Sports. I'm Jazz Monet with Bryan Broaddus, and we're out.